Is it okay, sir, now?
Yeah, now it's good. There is some echo from your side. I think you are logging from two accounts.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, you can mute one. Yeah, now it's good, I guess. Yeah.
now it's okay, right?
Yes, it is fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Hello. Hello, I'm sorry that. Is it okay now, sir?
Yeah, it is good. There are some participants. Their mic is not mute. I would request them to mute their mic so that it will be very calm here. Dr. Shabana, it is fine. Your voice is audible now. It is very clear.
Okay, thank you. So let me repeat once what I said. Very good evening to one and all once again, and very sorry for the technical error of related with the audio from my side. So it's a good evening, as I told you. It's a very good evening, and we are very happy to organize this particular 10-day workshop on molecular docking as a hands-on training on molecular docking, organized in collaboration jointly or together by the Directorate of Research, Staff Institute of Advanced Study, affiliated to the University of Calicut, Kerala, and with a group of very young-minded young people who is focusing on the advancement of science. That is Spark Institute of Advanced Science, SIAS Research Forum, Calicut, near Calicut University, Kerala. And it's my duty to welcome you all to this function. Today, I am very happy to extend a great welcome to our respected principal, sir, Professor E.P. Impichikoya, Principal, Safi Institute of Advanced Study, who is going to inaugurate this function and who is the leading light of our institution and is a great academician as well as a great philanthropist. So, with all happiness in our mind and with all the thankfulness to all your support, hearty welcome to this program, sir. Now it's the time to welcome the resource person of today, Dr. SMA Fayaz. Dr. SMA Fayaz, faculty, Manipal Institute of Technology, Karnataka, to this program. And we are eagerly waiting for your class on molecular docking, sir. Hearty welcome. And it's my privilege to
Thank you, ma'am.
welcome. Yeah. It's my privilege to welcome Dr. Hijaz KM, the Director, SIAS Research Forum, to this function, who is going to introduce this program, introduce about all about this program to all of you. Hearty welcome, Dr. Hijaz, and it's the time. And now I would like to extend a hearty welcome to now, I would like to extend a hearty welcome to all the participants, all the great participants who have joined with us, who have shown a great interest in this program, and who know what they are going to get with by attending this workshop. Hearty welcome to all the contestants from the bottom of my heart. And I am extending this welcome on behalf of the entire family of Safi Institute of Advanced Study, as well as the entire team of Spark Institute of Advanced Science. And a hearty welcome to one and all. And now I would like to welcome our respected principal, sir, Professor E.P. Imbichikoya, for inaugurating this function. Sir, please.
Okay, good evening, one and all. Resource person of today's function, Dr. S.M.A. Fayaz, the faculty of Manipal Institute of Technology, Karnataka. Mr. Dr. Hijaz KM from Spark Institute of Advanced Science. Dr. Shabana Mol, the Directorate of Research, Safi Institute of Advanced Study, and the Assistant Professor of Department of Microbiology. The participants from various parts of the country. As we know, today all are facing this pandemic situation. But even during this pandemic situation, the academic community could perform well as it was in the non or before this COVID-19. Even though the classes were shifted to the online media, many programs were conducted by the various universities and colleges. and many workshops and hands-on training is also conducted by many of the institutions in collaboration with many other industries and also the institutions. So today, the SAFI Institute of Advanced Study, in collaboration with the Spark Institute of Advanced Science, is conducting a 10-day workshop on the advanced molecular docking. As already explained by Dr. Shabana, this developments in the field of our own domain or our own discipline that should be updated by every individual, especially the academicians, whether it is researchers or whether it is a faculty or even whether it is a student. We must be aware about the recent developments in the field of the science and technology or the area in which we are actually engaged. So this is a golden opportunity for the participants because the 10 days program and it's a workshop, it's a hands-on training. And definitely, even though this online platform is a limitation, I hope that the resource persons, especially today's resource person, Dr. S.M.A. Fayaz and many others can overcome this limitation of the uh, online media by by deliberately engaging the participants in a very attractive manner. So I hope that this program will be very much useful to all the participants in this program. And the coming days also, the number of participants will be more than 100 because now we have more than 95, I think. So in the coming sessions also, we can expect this more than 100 participants in this program. So anyway, I hope this program will be very much useful to all the participants. I once again congratulate Dr. Shabana, the Research Directorate of SAFI Institute of Advanced Study, and also Dr. Hijaz from SAFI, the Spark Institute of Science, Advanced Science, for conducting this program jointly and is giving this platform and also giving the expertise of the various participants, the resource persons to the participants. With these words, let me conclude. And with these words, I formally inaugurate this 10 days workshop. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Now it's the time to start our session without any delay. I would like to call upon Dr. Hijaz KM from the Spark Institute of Advanced Science for introducing the program to the participants. Dr. Hijaz, please.
Yeah, Dr. Shabana, thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible, sir.
Okay, thank you. I will switch on my video and I will share a PPT. Give me 2 seconds. Hello, is my screen visible?
Yes, sir, your screen is visible.
Thank you so much. So, first of all, thank you so much for collaborating with us, and thanks for the good words from the principal. So, so we are starting this program today on advanced molecular docking, and this will continue till 26th October. So what I'm going to do is I'll just introduce our organization, SIAS Research Forum. We have in past we have collaborated with different institutions and conducted these kind of programs. So this is the latest one, Advanced Molecular Docking. So basically, this SIAS Research Forum is a part of Spark Institute of Advanced Science. We do different kinds of things like we do academic coaching programs. We have a research forum. We do workshops and trainings, and we collaborate with the industry.
Sir, 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 sorry to interrupt. Your voices are too low to hear, sir.
So in academic coaching, we started with a coaching for Airport Authority of India's air traffic controller examination. So this was in last December, and we are also providing coaching for IIT JAM examination, Joint Admission Test for MSc, both for physics and chemistry. Recently, we completed a crash course on Central University PG entrance examination, CUSET exams for physics and chemistry. So in the research, so these are the academic activities. On the research forum side, yeah, hello. Hello, am I audible?
Now it's clear, sir. It was little blurred, or it was not clear just
Okay,
before 5 minutes. Now I hope it's okay now.
it's okay. Okay, fine. Is it good now?
Yeah, it's okay
Okay,
for
fine,
me
fine.
and to others also. I think
Yeah,
no messages on chat box.
okay, fine. So yeah, so what I just said is we have different kinds of academic programs. We do give coachings for IIT JAM examination and for Central University PG entrance examinations and all. And in the research forum side, we make a research forum so that different people can come in together as a network. So it's a network of different kinds of researchers from science and engineering. So in this, you can take a membership, like we have faculty membership and student membership. So this will give you opportunities to collaborate with us, to conduct programs in your college, and also to be a part of our programs as a resource person and all. So these kind of opportunities are there. And also it will also allow you to network among the peers in your topic. So these kind of things are in process. Like so right now we give membership and we let them allow to collaborate with us. We give them financial benefits and discounts on our courses, and we are in a process of making a website which will allow you to communicate each other with among members, and it will also give you a membership profile and all in our website. So that will be more like a research community. We do give mentoring programs for science and engineering students on their projects, on their internships and all. We collaborate with different industries. So I will explain on some of our previous programs. We started with a 7 days hands-on training on ChemDraw and ChemSketch software. It was a 7-day program. We collaborated with PerkinElmer and ChemSketch team for this. Then we conducted a 8-day faculty development program on online chemistry teaching. And there is another 8-day hands-on training on rate oil refinement of powder X-ray data diffraction, powder X-ray data analysis using foolproof GSAS and also software called YANA. So this was done in collaboration with Crystal Impact Germany. So they were the founders of the Match software. So and right now a 1-month Python coding program is going for beginners. So this will end in another 2 days. The program is still going on. And we recently finished a workshop on elemental analysis, a 5-day workshop on elemental analysis. And another workshop was conducted on COMSOL multiphysics. So this was conducted by a professor in NIT Patna. He did this completely. And another course was recently finished on 10-day workshop on basics of stock market was recently finished. We just did a webinar on higher education opportunities in Ireland. So this was done in collaboration with Safi College, and molecular docking also being done in collaboration with Safi College. And there is our upcoming course. So these are more important. Our upcoming course, there is a 7 days hands-on training on Origin Pro software. This will happen from 8th to 14th November. We are doing this in collaboration with a college in Mysore. We are still negotiating with them. So that will be we are talking with them for that. It is almost finished, we are in agreement. So it will be starting on 8th to 14th November. And there is a 2-day workshop on reference management software is coming up. We are talking with Dr. Shabana about this. Mostly we will be hosting it in Safi itself. So this is the upcoming one. In the Origin Pro, you will be learning about various kinds of plotting and how to analyze spectroscopic data, different types of fitting, graph analysis, and all those things which you will explore complete Origin in 7 days. That's it. And another one, which is the most prominent program, which will happen in 20 to 24 January 2022. There will be an international conference on trends in material science. So we are already attached with material science proceedings for publication collaboration. we are talking with different institutions in the country for a collaboration. It is still in process, but hopefully this will make happen in 2024 January. So the abstract submission date will be 15th January. We will be soon putting out our advertisements for this program. So I was mentioning to the membership. So anybody of you are interested, you can take a professional membership or a student membership, so which has its own benefits and limitations as well. These are the institutes that with which we collaborated so far. So right now the Python coding program is running in collaboration with Ramzadeh College, West Bengal, and so the COMSOL multiphysics was happened in Anjil Catholic College, Tamil Nadu. So we are in collaboration with SAFI for this particular program. And as I just mentioned, in our previous programs, we collaborated with PerkinElmer, Crystal Impact, and Amrita Virtual Lab. Now, we are also working on developing materials for industry. We work on some wastewater management treatment projects. These things are going on. And we do a research consultancy services. We are we do kind of things like ritual refinement, computational analysis, and spectroscopic analysis. So if you have a data and if you find analyzing the data is very difficult, we will help you in analyzing it as a service. And we are also into publication. So these are the two books which we published so far. The first one is Learn Chemistry Through Demonstration. And the second one is Field-Induced Magnetic Transition on Particular Alloys. This is by Dr. Rashid Tipi from NIT Trichy. So this is the program schedule for advanced molecular docking. So you all must have received this in your email or on WhatsApp. So if anybody did not receive, you please contact us. And that's it. So if anybody has some questions on our organization, you're more than welcome. You can also contact us by email or WhatsApp or any day during the program. That's also fine. Dr. Shabana, that's it. That's what I want to tell. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much from our side also for your great collaboration, for giving a chance for collaborating with you. And I think we can move on to the program, right?
Sure.
Okay, so let me welcome Dr. SMA Fayaz, Assistant Professor, Department of Biotechnology, Manipal Institute of Technology, Karnataka. He has completed his BTech in biotechnology, MTech in bioinformatics, and completed his PhD in computational drug design. And he's having an H-index of 9 with a beautiful publication, a very good scientific index, scientific profile, I must say like that. And so let me welcome Dr. SMA Fayaz for the session. Sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Shabana.
Dr. Fayaz, can I tell a couple of things before you start for the audience?
Sure, Dr.
Yeah, sorry for that.
Please go on.
Thank you so much. Sorry for the interruption. So participants, I would like to tell something on the program. One is that we have sent you all the details of this software installation process and all, but we understand that some of you are facing some troubles in installing the softwares and all. So we would request you not to discuss the installation procedure in the live class, because it will consume a lot of time of our resource person. So we will definitely help you after the class. You can contact us in WhatsApp or in phone or in email, and we will definitely help you to solve your problems on the installation process, so that we can save time in our live sessions. And another thing is that after the class, you all will receive the recording of this class, of all the classes, in your email. So we will send you the YouTube links, but you can access that video only after signing into your YouTube with the registered email ID with us. So if you have registered with an email ID which is not from Gmail, which is some institution email ID or not, sometimes you may not be able to open it in that email ID in YouTube. So you can send us your Gmail ID, so that we will also give you access into that email, so that you can watch all the recorded videos after the sessions. And another thing, that we will also send you certificates after the completion of the course. So don't worry about those things. We will definitely in touch with you after the course as well. So, and also if you have any kind of doubts in these regards, anytime you can contact us. And yeah, there is a suggestions for a WhatsApp group. We will soon start that WhatsApp group. Maybe by today or tomorrow, we'll definitely make a WhatsApp group for that. And for those who need a receipt for contingency climbing and all, you can send us an email that you need a receipt. After the completion of the course, we will provide you the receipt as well. So that's it. Thank you so much, Dr. Fayaz. I'm so sorry for the interruption. You can start.
No problem, Dr. Hijaz. Can I share my screen now?
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, is my presentation visible?
Yes, it's visible, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, hello, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the workshop. So today is the first session. Though the workshop says it's on molecular docking, if you have seen, like you will be learning in the coming sessions, the protein. Yeah.
I think you can close that next slide option, that the PPT, the entire slide is visible, entire screen is visible like that. Could you move on to the slideshow now? No, yes.
Is it better now?
Yeah, the same thing is there. It's okay.
I
Let
will
it
do
go
one
like
thing, ma'am. Like maybe I have shared the entire, this thing.
screen.
Yeah. Maybe I will share only the PPT.
Mm.
Is it better now?
It's coming. It's okay. Now it's clear, sir.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Yeah. So yeah, so if you see, like though the workshop is on molecular docking, in the coming sessions you will be learning protein docking or protein ligand docking. So in these sessions, the common thing is a protein, right? So be it a protein ligand docking or protein docking, you need a protein structure. So for performing these tasks, if you don't have a protein structure, then you can't, perform a protein ligand docking or a protein docking and study the interactions and whatever research you want to perform or carry out, that can't be done without a protein structure. So that is why this session, like the protein structure prediction, will just give you a brief outline of like if you don't have a protein structure with you in order to perform a docking or some other studies, so you can predict the protein structure. So this is all about the protein structure prediction session. So today I will be discussing a few theoretical concepts, a few basics of protein structure prediction, and tomorrow we will be looking the hands-on, like how to perform, how to predict a structure through one of the methods. Moving forward, so this is the outline of my presentation today. What is protein structure prediction? What do we exactly mean by protein structure? So what are the different protein structure determination methods? So why protein structure prediction is required? The protein structure prediction methods that are available. And finally, one of the widely used methods, that is homology modeling, which we'll be looking at tomorrow hands-on as well. So protein structure prediction, as the name suggests, like it is a prediction of a three-dimensional structure of a protein from its amino acid sequence. So we know like protein is made up of amino acids, and it involves the prediction of secondary, tertiary, and quaternary structure from the primary structure of the protein. So from this statement, you can understand that there are different structural levels of the protein. Like we have the primary structure, and protein structure prediction involves the prediction of secondary, tertiary, and quaternary structure. So let us see what are the different structural levels of a protein. So whenever we want to predict the protein structure, first we should know what is meant by a protein, like what the protein structure contains, what are the different elements that are present in a protein structure so that we can accurately predict the structure. So there are different structure levels in a protein with the primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure, and quaternary structure. So as the name suggests, like you can see, it's in a hierarchy basically. So coming to the primary structure of a protein, it is nothing but the concatenated amino acids. That is, you have series of amino acids connected to each other by means of peptide bonds, right? So yeah. So here we have these beads are nothing but amino acids, and the link between these amino acids are the peptide bonds. So amino acids are connected to each other by means of a covalent bond known as peptide bond. And this series of amino acids, this chain of amino acids, you call it as a primary structure of the protein. And if you look at the any amino acid, basically it has 4 parts. So you have a central carbon attached to a hydrogen, and then you have a carboxyl group and an amino group. So in addition to this, you have an R group, which is, you call it as side chain. So this R group, like how we have studied our chemistry in our lower classes, maybe if you remember. So we have like R groups in our, functional groups. The functional groups we just mention or denote with R. So it can be a OH group, it can be a CH3 methyl group or ethyl group, right? So it is generally mentioned with R. So similarly, R group is the one that is varying. This is the variable group in the amino acids. So that is why it is denoted with R. So here you have 2 amino acids, say for example, glycine and alanine. So which combine with each other or which bond with each other by means of the covalent bond, that is peptide bond. So the carboxyl group of one amino acid combines with the amino group of the another amino acid. So the carboxyl amino group forms a bond, and this bond you call it as a peptide bond. And here if you see this particular amino acid, as I told you, you have the central carbon connected to a hydrogen. On one side you have a amino group, on the other side you have a carboxyl group, and R group is the variable group for all the amino acids. So here we have basically 2 parts of an amino acid. So this part is known as the backbone of amino acid. So this backbone is same for all the amino acids. So we have basically 20 amino acids that make up the proteins, and all the 20 amino acids contain the same backbone. All of the 20 amino acids contain the central carbon with the hydrogen, amino group, and carboxyl group. So this backbone is same for all the 20 amino acids. Only the R group is varying in all the 20 amino acids. And this R group is known as the side chain of the amino acid. So we have 2 parts, backbone and side chain. So based on the movement of the backbone and the side chains, we have different angles in the protein between the amino acids. So when 2 amino acids are bound to each other by means of a peptide bond, this you can see, this is a peptide bond between a carboxyl group of one amino acid and amino group of another amino acid. And this is the peptide bond. So the amino group bond can rotate here with respect to the central carbon, and also the carboxyl group can rotate with respect to the central carbon. So this rotation, the angles, we call it as phi angle for the amino group and psi angle for the carboxyl group. And these 2 angles, we call them as dihedral angles. So the phi and psi angles, they define the backbone geometry because these are the backbone amino acids, right? So the amino group and the carboxyl group are part of the backbone of the amino acid. And since they are moving at a particular certain angle, you call them as phi and psi angles. Similarly, based on the phi and psi angles, so the movement of the phi and psi angles, we have a plot known as Ramachandran plot. So this we will be discussing in detail in in this session or tomorrow's session as well. So the Ramachandran plot is that was introduced by Dr. Ramachandran. He studied all the known structures of proteins, and he studied the phi and psi angles between the amino acids in the protein structures. So after studying the phi and psi angles that were available from the experimentally identified protein structures, he understood that the phi and psi angles of amino acids fall in a certain range. Say, for example, you have alanine. Say, for example, alanine contains a certain range of phi angle and certain range of psi angle. So alanine can't have more or less than that particular range. So it won't deviate from that range. So similarly, all the 20 amino acids, if you see, they have certain ranges of phi and psi angles. So Ramchandran plotted those phi and psi angles of the amino acids, and that we call it as Ramchandran plot. And this Ramchandran plot is widely used for our protein structure validation. So when we predict the protein structure, we need to know whether the structure that we have predicted is correct or wrong. So Ramchandran plot is one of the validating methods that can be used to know whether the predicted protein structure is correct or not, right? So based on the phi and psi angles. So this is the phi and psi angle, plot of all the 19 amino acids except glycine, and this is the phi and psi angle ranges of glycine basically. So why glycine? If you see the 19 amino acids, they fall at certain regions in the coordinates, whereas glycine is occupying all the area in all the 4 coordinates. Why? What is the reason? The reason is because that glycine contains a flexible backbone. So here, if you see, these are the 20 amino acids, and if you see glycine here, this is the backbone, and these shaded regions are the side chains. So you can make out from this figure that the backbone is same for all the 20 amino acids, right? So the backbone is same for all the amino acids. Only the shaded regions are different. The shaded regions are nothing but the side chains. And here, if you see glycine, so it contains only hydrogen atom here. So except glycine, all the other amino acids contain bulky side chains. I mean, large side chains. The smallest side chain is with glycine, which contains only a single hydrogen atom. So since only hydrogen is present at glycine, it will be very flexible. Hydrogen, like it moves very fast. It vibrates very, fast. So that is why, because it has greater flexibility, you have a large range of phi and psi angles for glycine. So coming to the secondary structure. So the secondary structure, we have different elements. So the primary structure, that is the amino acids that are connected to each other by means of peptide bond, you call it as a primary structure. And this primary structure, that is the series of amino acids, they form certain secondary structure elements. And there are typically 3 secondary structure elements basically. They are alpha helices, beta sheets, and loops. So what is an alpha helix? It is, as the name suggests, it is helical. So we have studied in biology that DNA is a double helical structure, right? So similar to DNA, it is also a helical structure. So this helical structure is because of the bonds between the backbone of the amino acids. And typically alpha helices are 5 to 40 amino acids long and average 10 amino acids, and mostly right-handed. These are right-handed helices. And these bonds are typically hydrogen bonds. So hydrogen bonds are formed between the backbone of the amino acids, which give up the helical structure that is alpha helix. And the next secondary structure element is the beta sheet. As the name suggests, it is a flat sheet-like structure. So we usually use the term sheet for flat surfaces, right? So paper sheet or something like that, right? So as the name suggests, the sheet is a flat structure which is different from the alpha helix. Alpha helix is helical, whereas a beta sheet is sheet-like structure. And this sheet-like structure is again because of the hydrogen bonds with the backbone of the amino acids. And there are 2 types of beta sheet elements, like parallel beta sheets and anti-parallel beta sheets. based on the hydrogen bonds between the beta sheet elements. So beta sheet is usually represented as an arrow mark. So this is the the beginning of the beta sheet, and this is the end of the beta sheet. So if the arrow marks are in the same direction, so it is known as a parallel beta sheet. They are towards the same direction. They are parallel to each other. If the sheets are anti-parallel, obviously you call them as anti-parallel beta sheets. And the next secondary structure element we have are loops. So these are basically thread-like structures that connects the helices and strands. So different secondary structure elements like beta sheets and strands are nothing but beta sheets. Basically, we use these terms interchangeably. So sometimes we call them as strands, beta strand or beta sheet. So the sheets and helices or the different sheets, two sheets or two helices need to be connected. So what it mean to say is like that secondary structure elements need to be connected with each other, and this connection is established by means of thread-like structure known as loops. And these are more flexible because they don't have a typical structure. Basically, they are thread-like, so they can move in any direction. And the short structures of loops usually we call it as turns or coils. Basically, whenever you discuss the protein structures, you come across these terms: loops, coils, turns, etc. So loops are very long structures, whereas the short structures we call them as turns or coils. And when you see the Ramachandran plot where these secondary structure elements fall, so usually the beta sheets fall in this coordinate. The alpha helix, which is I told you, like mostly it is right-handed, so the right-handed alpha helices fall in this coordinate, whereas there are few left-handed alpha helices as well which fall in this coordinate. So coming to the tertiary structure of the protein, as I told you, the secondary structure of the protein is by forming hydrogen bonds between the backbone of the amino acids. And now if these secondary structure elements, if they fold three-dimensionally, it becomes a tertiary structure. And this tertiary structure is basically because of the hydrogen bonds between the side chain of the amino acids. So there are different types of tertiary structures available which contains only alpha helices, or which might be made up of only beta sheets, or a combination of alpha sheets or alpha helices and beta sheets. So when you see an example like this, this is a protein structure here. So this flat-like structure, the arrow mark-like structures, we call them as beta sheets or strands. And this helical structure, it's an alpha helix. And the connecting thread-like structures, which connect the different secondary structural elements, be it alpha helix to a sheet here. So here a thread-like structure is connecting a sheet to the helix. Here two sheets are connected with each other. So these are typically loops. So these are the three essentially available tertiary structures of secondary structural elements of a protein. And these secondary structures combine together and they fold three-dimensionally like this to form a tertiary structure. And this tertiary structure, as I told you, is because of the hydrogen bonding or some other bonds between the side chain of the amino acids. So the peptide bond is a covalent bond, which is present in the primary structure. And in the secondary structure, you have the hydrogen bonds between the backbone of the amino acids. And in the tertiary structure, you have all sorts of bonds between the side chain of the amino acids. So the bonds may be like hydrogen bonds. You have polar bonds, ionic bonds. Like here you have hydrophobic bonds, hydrophobic interactions, right? So van der Waals interactions. So there are different types of interactions that are available between the atoms or the molecules. So usually we study about covalent bonds, ionic bonds, hydrogen bonds, hydrophobic interactions, van der Waals interactions. So these are the 5 types of interactions that are usually seen in biomolecules. So usually in the protein, if you talk about protein, the structure of a protein, you see 5 types of bonds typically. They are covalent bond, hydrogen bond, hydrophobic interactions, van der Waals interactions, and ionic bonds. And the covalent bond in a protein, basically in the tertiary structure of protein, you call it as a disulfide bond. So between two sulfurs, you have a covalent bond, and that bond you call it as a disulfide bond. Coming to the quaternary structure is nothing but a combination of tertiary structures. So you have a primary structure, which is nothing but a series of amino acids connected with each other by means of peptide bond. This primary structure, the amino acids form hydrogen bonds between the backbones to give either helical structure or alpha helices or beta sheets. And these alpha helices, beta sheets, they fold three-dimensionally to give a tertiary structure by means of bonds between the side chain of the amino acids. And the bonds can be covalent bond, hydrogen bond, hydrophobic interactions, ionic interactions, etc. And different tertiary structures combine together to give a quaternary structure. So the biological function is typically by means of quaternary structure. Sometimes it can be because of the tertiary structure as well. So whatever we say, like the protein is having a function, the function, usually the function of a protein doesn't attribute to the primary or secondary structures. It is at the tertiary or quaternary structure level. So for example, if you take the quaternary structure of hemoglobin, so we have four chains in hemoglobin: beta globin, two beta globin chains, and two alpha globin chains. So this chain, each chain is a tertiary structure. So four chains, that is two alpha globin chains and two beta globin peptide chains. That's what I mean. What I mean by chain is peptide chain. So these four tertiary structures combine together to give a quaternary structure known as hemoglobin. And usually whenever you take a protein, it need not be formed, it can be formed by only one peptide chain, or it can be formed by means of two peptide chains, or three peptide chains, or four peptide chains like this. In hemoglobin, we have four peptide chains. So if the peptide chains, if a protein is made up of two peptide chains, and if they are same, like here we have a beta globin and beta globin, two peptide chains, and each one is a tertiary structure. So this together form a quaternary structure, and both are same here. So we call it as a dimer. If only two peptide chains are present, we call it as a dimer. Di means two. And since they are same, we call it as a homodimer. And if the sequences or the peptide chains are different, say for example, we have two peptide chains here. Let us assume there are only two peptide chains. One is beta globin and another is alpha globin. So these are different. So here it is a dimer, but the peptide chains are different. You call it as a heterodimer. So homodimer is where you have the same peptide chains. Heterodimer is where you have different peptide chains. So this is a quaternary structure with a four peptide chains here. So now comes the concept of domains basically. So what is a domain? Domain is a term which we usually use, in the case of proteins. So whenever you take any protein structure, the entire structure of the protein is not important for its function. There are certain regions in the protein that are important for its function, and those regions you call them as domains. So the functional regions in the proteins are known as domains. And say for example, if a protein contains multiple functions, it will be having multiple domains. So different structural domains can be associated with different functions. So here you can see there are two domains here, a small domain and a large domain connected by a hinge. This is in DNA methyltransferase. Similarly, if you take another protein, that is cathepsin D, you have two domains basically. So another example of a quaternary structure with multiple domains is glyceraldehyde phosphate dehydrogenase, where you have two domains, and each domain performs a different function. So here domain 1 binds the substrate that is need to be metabolized, and domain 2 binds to a cofactor like ATP or some other ions. So the domain is nothing but the functional region in a protein. If the protein contains multiple functions, it will have multiple domains. Coming to the protein structure determination versus protein structure prediction. So protein structure determination is nothing but identifying the protein structure using experimental methods. And protein structure prediction obviously is the prediction of structure using computational tools and methods. So coming to the protein structure determination methods. So when you see what are the different methods that are available for protein structure determination, like how experimental you can identify the protein structure. Typically we use three methods. One is X-ray crystallography, NMR spectroscopy, and lastly electron microscopy. These are the three methods that are typically used to identify the structure of a protein. And the accuracy of the methods is in the same order. So X-ray crystallography is better compared to the NMR spectroscopy, which is again better than electron microscopy. It's in the same order, right? So using X-ray crystallography, you will get good structures. And NMR spectroscopy is the next method where you can give, typically okay structures. Whereas electron microscopy is usually used for identifying protein structures for very small proteins. So large protein structures can't be identified using electron microscopy accurately. So this is usually used for identifying structures of either peptides or small proteins. But typically X-ray crystallography is widely used to identify the structure of proteins accurately. Coming to the X-ray crystallography, as the name suggests, it involves the crystallization of the proteins. So that is why we call it as X-ray crystallography, where you prepare the crystals that contains the proteins. Basically, say for example, here you have the proteins in a solution. You extract the proteins from the cell, and then you prepare crystals out of that proteins, and these crystals contain the proteins entrapped in the crystals. And using X-ray diffraction methods, you pass the X-rays onto this particular crystal and you identify the structure of the protein. So you identify the diffraction patterns by throwing the X-rays, like how we undergo X-rays, right? Let's say for example, if your hand undergoes fracture, if you fell down and if your hand is fractured, what you do immediately, the doctor calls for the X-ray, right? So that time what happens, the X-rays are passed onto the hand and you identify like what is the structure of the hand. It typically shows you the structure of the hand, right, by passing the X-ray. Similarly, the same concept, by passing the X-rays you can identify the structure of the protein that is in the crystal, like this. So then you have an important concept known as resolution. So today what I'm discussing, whatever concepts I'm discussing are the basic concepts related to the protein, and all these concepts will be using tomorrow in the next session for the protein structure prediction hands-on, right? So the resolution is something which is very important when you go for X-ray crystallography. So in X-ray crystallography, resolution is the smallest distance between crystal lattice planes that is resolved in the diffraction pattern. Like if this statement is too complex for you, you can simply understand that it is the the distance between crystal planes. If the distance is small, then the protein structure will be predicted accurately. So for better protein structure identification, the distance between the crystal lattices should be small. So say for example here, the distance usually you measure in angstroms, right? Angstrom units. So here this is 1.5 angstroms. So this is 2 angstroms. This is 3 and this is 5. So this is how the distance between lattice planes looks like. So if the distance between the lattice planes is minimum, then the structure prediction of the protein will be very accurate. So what resolution usually is typically required, a high resolution protein structure, usually we look at like 1.5 to 2 angstroms resolution. So if the X-ray structure is identified or the structure is determined at 1.5 to 2 angstroms resolution, then we say like the structure is having high resolution and it is very accurate. So if the distance is more, let's say for example it is 5 angstroms, we say that the resolution is less. So it is what you say, inversely you can say proportional to their distance basically, right? The resolution. So the higher the distance, the less the resolution is. So if you see, yeah, this is how different resolutions look like: 1 angstrom, 2 angstrom, 2.73, etc. So you can see like here when you the distance is more, as the distance increases, the protein structure is haphazard basically. It's not very accurate. Here you can see the accurate coordinates, like where are the atoms located, where are the bonds located, right? So easily you can identify here when the distance is very less. So that is why when you talk about resolution, the lower the value, the lower the distance, the higher the resolution is. So this is like this. So as the distance increases, we say that the resolution of the structure is low. So the resolution of the structure is high when the distance is low, and usually at high resolutions, you get very accurate structures. So resolution, yeah, it refers to the sharpness and clarity of image. 2 angstrom resolution, meaning resolution at 2 angstroms with 2 angstrom distance between the planes, and usually 1.5 angstroms you call it as high resolution, and 5 angstroms you call it as low resolution. It's inverse to the values here, the distances. So the next one is the NMR spectroscopy, where you have the nuclear magnetic resonance. You pass the magnetic field here, and the atoms resonate based on the frequency of the atoms. You measure, like you identify what might be the atom there, right? So based on the magnetic field, the atoms move in the magnetic field. So based on the movement, like if it is hydrogen, it moves very fast. If it is carbon, it is bulky, right? So it moves little slow compared to the hydrogen. So based on the movement of the atoms, you identify what might be the atom at that particular place, and thereby you identify the structure of the whole protein. So this is comparatively less accurate than X-ray crystallography. And as I told you, the next method is electron microscopy, which is way less accurate, but you can use that for predicting smaller protein structures. So now whatever structures that are usually identified, so all these protein structures are deposited at certain databases. So database is a base or a place where the data is stored. So if the data is a protein structure, you call it as a protein structure database. And the typical or official structural repository of protein structures is PDB, that is Protein Data Bank. So PDB is the official structure repository. So whatever structures are identified or determined experimentally using X-ray or NMR or electron microscopy, these structures are usually stored or deposited in the Protein Data Bank, and it is freely accessible. So we can go to the Protein Data Bank and we can retrieve the protein structures. We can download the protein structures, and we can usually go for any structural analysis, or if you want to perform docking, you can do the docking, all sorts of the things, right? So now the next question is, why protein structure prediction? Why do you need to predict the protein structure? Because we already have certain methods for protein structure determination, like X-ray, NMR, and electron microscopy. Then why do you want to go for protein structure prediction? Because there is a huge gap between the known structures and known sequences. So if you take the protein sequences, so as of these are old statistics, but still it gives you a glimpse of like what is actually present. So as of 2016, the experimentally determined structures, maybe X-ray or NMR or electron, so it were approximately 86,000, right? So if you see the protein sequences that were available at that time, there were more than like 4 lakh sequences. So there were 4 lakh proteins that were already known, but out of these 4 lakh proteins, only 86,000 contained the structures. So what about the other ones? Like say, for example, if you want to do some experiment on a protein structure, if you want to analyze a protein structure, maybe docking or some other thing. you want the protein structure, right? So usually you go to the PDB, that is the protein data bank, and look for the structure. But usually you may not get the structure because you have very less structures when compared to the known protein sequences. So if you don't have the structure, then what is obviously you need to do? You need to predict the protein structure using computational methods. So the protein structure prediction methods, if you look at computationally, we have typically 4 methods. Recently, we had only 3 methods, only homology modeling, threading, and ab initio prediction. And recently, we have started identifying the protein structures using artificial intelligence as well. So this is the recent advancement of protein structure prediction. But typically, we usually had 3 methods: homology modeling, threading, and ab initio. So whenever you look at the sequences, basically as the number of residues you align, the similarity or identity usually reduces. So this is the number of sequences, that is the similarity between the sequences. That is what I'm talking about. When you compare two protein sequences, as the length of the sequence increases, what happens? The identity or the similarity between the sequences reduces basically, right? So what you need to do here, basically you need to use different methods when you are going for different similarity or identity percentages. So here I have discussed like homology modeling or threading or ab initio prediction. So when do we usually use these methods? So that is the question now. So when do we use homology modeling? When do we use threading? Or when do we use ab initio prediction? This is when typically when your identity with the known structures is less. You will understand better in the coming slides. So when we talk about the prediction of structure from sequence, this is typically flow chart. So where you have a query sequence is nothing but the protein sequence whose structure is not known. So you want to work with a protein, you want to dock that particular protein, right? You want to use that particular protein structure in docking, but you don't have the structure available in the PDB, right? So then what you do, you try to predict the protein structure for that sequence. So that is known as query sequence. And in usually what you do, you try to find the similar sequences of known structures. So already I told you that the structures, protein structures are already available in the PDB. So what you do is you try to find the similar sequences of those structures, similarity between the sequence of those structures. So obviously a structure is nothing but a tertiary or quaternary level of a protein, right? So the primary structure is nothing but the sequence. So what you do is you take your query sequence, you try to compare that sequence with the sequences of the structures that are present in the PDB. So now, if the similarity is more than 35%, usually you go with homology modeling, which is also known as comparative modeling. If the percentage is less than 35, so then usually what you do is you go with threading or fold recognition. And in threading or fold recognition, we try to see whether it matches with any of the fold. So this we will understand in the coming slides. If it doesn't match with any fold, known fold, so then we go with the ab initio prediction method. So this is how we decide which method to use based on our sequence. So now again, like why do you need to predict the protein structure or a model? So when you don't have X-ray or NMR spectroscopy structure, you need to go for the structure prediction. So it gives you a lot of information on how the protein looks like. So what are the different regions in the protein, and also the model structure can be used for different studies like mutation studies or docking or drug design, etc. So the homology modeling, the first method, if you go, it is nothing but the prediction of three-dimensional structure of a protein, which is a target protein. So I told you the protein whose structure is not known, you call it as a target protein. So you have the amino acid sequence, that is the primary structure. You try to compare that with the template. So template is nothing but the proteins whose structure is already known in the PDB through X-ray or NMR. So through X-ray crystallography or NMR, you might have identified the protein structures, and those structures are already available in the PDB database. So those structures, you call them as templates. So you compare your protein sequence that is whose structure is not known, that is the target, with the sequence of the known structures. And what is the basis for homology modeling? The basis is we usually hypothesize that the proteins with similar sequences are likely to have the same structure. So similar sequences will have similar structures. So that is the hypothesis or the basis which we believe, and we usually go for homology modeling. So when the sequence of the target protein and the protein whose structure is already known in PDB, that is the template, if the sequences are same, then we believe that their structures also might be same, and based on this template structure, we try to predict the target protein structure. So in homology modeling, what we do, we usually need the structure of the target protein, so whose structure is not known. So here you have the sequence of the target protein whose structure is not known, right? So what you do, you try to find the similar sequences from the PDB, protein data bank. So the sequences in protein data bank are what? These are the sequences of the structures in the protein data bank. So in protein data bank, you already have the structures, and what we do is the sequences of those structures will be taken, and to those sequences we will compare our query sequence. And if it is same or if it is matching with the the template, then what we do, we use this particular structure as the template structure as the basis or reference, and we try to build the model or the structure for our target sequence. So initially we have the target sequence whose structure is not known. We then compare it with the sequences that are available in the PDB. PDB contains the structures, and those structures obviously have the sequences. So we can compare the sequences, and whichever sequence is matching with our query sequence, that particular structure is taken as the template and it is used as the reference, and the structure for our query sequence will be predicted. So this is the overall picture of homology modeling. So if you take the model building from template, usually you have three regions that need to be built for the structure. So you have the core conserved regions, you have the variable loop regions, and the side chains. So the conserved regions, loop regions, and the side chain. Conserved regions are nothing but the matching regions. So here what we are doing, we are comparing our target sequence with the template sequence, right? So say for example 80% of this sequence is matching with this sequence whose structure is already available in the PDB. So 80% is matching. So this 80% is known as the conserved region. So this conserved region is built based on that 80%. So the remaining 20%, which is not matching, that will exist as loops, and you call them as variable loop region. And finally, you obviously the amino acids contain side chains, and the side chains modeling should be done. So these are the three regions we need to model when we are performing homology modeling. So it goes as this, like given a query sequence. So you have a database of known protein structures in PDB. You have a query sequence with you, right? So now what you need to do, you need to find protein P such that P has high sequence similarity to Q. So your query sequence is Q whose structure is not known. You have protein structures P in the data bank. You need to find the protein P which is actually highly similar to your Q, and based on that P, taking as that as reference, you identify the structure of Q, right? So finally, once the protein structure is identified, we go with a step known as energy minimization. Why energy minimization is required? So see, in not only in homology modeling, in other methods also we will be discussing about energy minimization, right? So why energy minimization? Because you take any biomolecule, we believe that the molecules with less energy will be more stable. So we have studied in our classes, in our chemistry classes, right, about orbitals, electrons, etc. Right, if you remember. So we have studied that electrons, when they gain energy, they move from lower orbital to the higher orbital. And in higher orbital, what happens? The electrons are usually unstable, so they lose energy and again go back to the lower energy orbital, right? So because they are more stable at lower energy, the same concept holds here for any biomolecule, because all the molecules contain the electrons basically and the orbitals, right? So that is why whenever you take any biomolecule, the molecule that is having higher energy will be less stable and the molecule with the lower energy will be more stable. So that is why we perform energy minimization on the predicted structures, so that the structure with the minimum energy will be more stable. So usually we look for stable structures, right? Because the stable structures are the ones that are near to your actual structures in our body, in our cells. So when you take the homology modeling, you have something known as backbone modeling. We have seen that amino acids contain backbone and side chains, right? So usually we go for backbone modeling. So where we model the secondary structural elements like alpha helices, beta sheets, etc. And you have loop modeling, where we model the loops. So we have seen these are the three essentially secondary structural elements: alpha helices, beta sheets, and loops. So these are modeled in homology modeling. And apart from this backbone, so the backbone modeling is modeling of this secondary structural elements. And apart from that, you have the side chains of amino acids, and this is modeled, and you call that as side chain modeling. And side chain modeling is mainly because of the energy refinement. Because the side chains are very flexible, they move a lot. So what we usually do is we try to minimize the energy of the side chains, right? So usually we take the conserved side chains into consideration, and we use the same conserved side chains for building our structure. So conserved side chain in the sense, the side chains that are matching with our target sequence, right? So whichever amino acids are matching in the target sequence with the template structure, so those are known as conserved amino acids and the conserved side chains. So they are taken directly from the template. And the amino acids which are not conserved, right? So how do you find that side chains? Whichever are conserved, you take from the template, right? Conserved means the target are matching with the template. So whichever are not matching, they are non-conserved. So how do you find them? You find them using some libraries of side chains known as rotamer libraries. And there are different softwares that are used for homology modeling. There are free softwares like Modeler, Swiss PDB Weaver that can be downloaded and that can be used. So for tomorrow's hands-on session, we'll be using Modeler. So there are different web-based tools like web-based servers, which you can directly go online and you can submit your sequence, protein sequence, and you'll get the structure like Swiss model, CPH model, ModWeb server, etc. There are a few commercial softwares as well, which are paid. You need to pay money and purchase them, like Schrodinger, Discover Studio, etc. But among the freeware available, Modeler is the best software so far. So coming to the next method of protein structure prediction, that is threading or fold recognition. So the structure prediction which can't be done using homology modeling, though for those protein sequences, you use threading or fold recognition method. So as we have seen in the previous slides, if the similarity between the target protein sequence and the template structure in the PDB, if it is more than 35%, you go for homology modeling. If it is less than 35%, if the similarity is less than 35%, then homology modeling can't be used. It doesn't give you an accurate structure. So that is why we go with other methods like threading or fold recognition. So it recognizes the folds of the protein sequences. Fold is nothing but a three-dimensional, folding of the protein, right? So that is why we call it as fold recognition. So recognizing the three-dimensional structure of the protein or the fold of the protein. So why is it basically called threading? because it is threaded onto the all the known protein structures. So say for example, we have 10 protein structures in the protein data bank. So what it does is it takes the protein sequence. If you assume the protein sequence as a thread, I will discuss in the coming slides. This is a very approximate method. And here, basically, if you look at all the known protein structures in the protein data bank, all these structures were known to form in certain folds. So only certain folds are available in all the protein structures. So that means whatever protein sequence is there with you, whose structure is not known, it should typically fall within one of these folds, because you have only these folds available so far from the known protein structures, right? So that is why what we do is we try to take our protein sequence whose structure is not known and mount the protein sequence onto one of the known structures, right? And see like which structure is which of these structures is matching more with your sequence. So this by finding the best fit of the sequence and finding the sequence fold alignment using the fitness scores, etc. So this is in threading basically. So basically what it does is, like say for example, here you have the conserved core segments. So you can see here, this is protein A, this is protein B. So the structures are different in protein A and protein B. But what you see here is typically the same fold. The core region is same, right? So this is called the core fold. So where usually the functional region might be present. So based on this concept, we try to go for threading. So in threading, what we usually do is, say for example, you have a query sequence with you, the protein sequence with you, whose structure is not known. So what you typically do is, you already have a library of folds or the structures in the protein data bank, right? So now this sequence is considered as a thread, and it will be folded in accordance with the available folds. So it will be folded same like this. It will be folded similar to this, and it will be folded similar to this. And energies of these structures will be calculated. So now, as I told you, that the protein structure is the native structure, or the correct structure is the one which has minimum energy, right? So when you take a protein sequence and when you try to fold in this particular structure, when you calculate the energy, if the energy is very high, so that means it will be very unstable. So that means it is less likely that this sequence will have a structure like this. When you take this sequence and when you fold in this particular pattern, right? So when you calculate the energy, say for example, the energy is less here. So that means this particular sequence, when it has a structure like this, will have a less energy and it will be more stable. So that means compared to this structure, this sequence is more likely to have this structure because it is having less energy and it will be more stable. So that is what we do usually in threading. So scoring and selection is basically the energy calculation basically. And yeah, so whichever energy, whichever structure is having less energy, the structure we usually consider for that protein sequence. So that is how we predict the protein structure using threading. And there are different tools for threading, like top it's 3D PSS, SM, 3Gen Threader, iTaser, etc. So for threading, iTaser is the best known tool. So usually when we check the accuracy of the tools available or the servers available, iTaser is known as the best known tool for threading or fold recognition. So the next one is ab initio or free modeling method, where you try to find the structure of a protein. Here, when you do use the ab initio method, when you don't have a template or the known structure in the PDB, which is similar to your target sequence, more than 35%. So if you have a target protein sequence with you, whose structure is not known, first thing what we do is we try to go for homology modeling. So we try to compare that with all the known structures in the PDB. So if the similarity is greater than 35%, if you get any structure whose similarity is greater than 35%, use that structure as a reference and you try to predict the structure using homology modeling. Say, for example, you have not got any structure in the PDB which is greater than 35% similarity. So then what you do, you try to go for threading or fold recognition. Try to find the fold already available folds. Try to fold your sequence with all the available folds and try to calculate the energies. Whichever fold has the minimum energy, that you usually consider as the protein structure. Say, for example, none of the folds is having less energy. So then what you can do, you can't consider any of the folds as the structure, right? So then what you do, you usually go for the next method, that is the ab initio or free modeling method. So ab initio method is, as the name suggests, it's like from the initial stage. Ab initio, initio means from the initial step. So that is from each amino acid one by one, the amino acids will be attached to each other, and the structure of the amino acids will be calculated slowly from the primary sequence to the quaternary structure. So from the primary to the quaternary, step by step, energy minimization is done on each step, and then the structure will be determined. So this is very time consuming and very computational intense method, which is usually not used basically, right? We usually don't use ab initio method, but if it is very small peptide sequence, if you have, you can go for ab initio prediction for very small peptides like 5 to 10 amino acids length, etc. Right? So here usually we use a software tool known as Rosetta for ab initio structure prediction. Usually you take a sequence, you slowly start folding the sequence and try to minimize the energy at each stage. So thereby you finally predict the structure. So here for example, I've given a very big protein structure, but usually you don't get this much of structure using ab initio method. It will be usually a small peptide fragment you can get. So yeah, so this is what I told you. You have the sequence, you find the secondary structure, some tertiary structure, and each stage you do the energy minimizations, and finally you predict the structure. So ab initio method is usually not used for protein structure prediction. So yeah, as I told you, energy minimization is a very important point in ab initio method. So the next method which has come up is the artificial intelligence. So this is a company, DeepMind, which has started using artificial intelligence for protein structure prediction. So this is the recent advancement in protein structure prediction. So the method is known as AlphaFold. So this uses AI for protein structure prediction, AlphaFold. And recently we have an article in Nature as well, published around July in this year, saying like high accurate protein structures can be predicted using AlphaFold. And AlphaFold, whatever structures it predicts, so the protein structures are deposited in a database known as AlphaFold protein structure database. So if you want the structures, if you don't have a protein structure with you, you can usually go with the protein data bank and check for the structure. If the structure is not available, then you can go for the protein structure prediction using homology modeling or other methods. But before that, you can come to AlphaFold database and you can check here for the predicted structures here, right? You might get a structure here. But still we need to see, this is a recent advancement. We don't know like whether it will be able to predict all the structures accurately or not. It is not clear because it is very recent advancement. You need to know it through the years to come. And yeah, so now in another 5 to 10 minutes, I will quickly go through homology modeling in detail because this is what we will be doing tomorrow in the hands-on session. So the homology modeling, it is basically, as I have again, I don't want to repeat it. Okay, so it is the identification of protein structure from a sequence, protein sequence whose structure is not known, right? So here, as I told you, what you basically believe is that the sequences, similar sequences will have similar structures. So what you do is you take a sequence whose structure is not known, the target sequence. You try to match with the sequence of structures in the PDB. If it is matching, you will take that particular structure as the reference and build the structure for your protein target. Here you have two terms, basically identity and positivity or positively related. So positively related, you call it as similarity as well. So I just want to highlight these two terms because we'll be using these terms in the tomorrow's session. Identity and similarity. Similarity are positively related. So what is identity and similarity? If you see the protein sequences, if you compare two protein sequences, if the amino acids are exactly the same, you call it as identity. So here you have methionine, here also you have methionine, you call them as identical, and this is identity. Whereas if you see two amino acids, like say for example leucine and valine, these two are not exactly the same or identical, but they are similar. So what do you mean by similar? If you take the amino acids, all the known 20 amino acids, we can group these 20 amino acids into different categories, like based on the side chains, like positively charged amino acids, negatively charged amino acids, hydrophilic amino acids, hydrophobic amino acids, right? So if two amino acids are in the same group, that means these amino acids have the same properties and you call them as similar amino acids. They may not be exactly the same, but they are similar because they have the same properties. Both can be hydrophilic amino acids, right? Or here, these two can be like the same, say for example, here, asparagine glutamine. So these are charged amino acids, negatively charged, right? So like that, you can see that there are two things, identity and similarity. Identity is exactly the same amino acids, you call them as identical, and they may not be exactly the same, but they might be having the same property because they fall in the same group. They call them as positively related or similar amino acids. So these are the two terms which we usually use when we go for homology modeling, identity and similarity. That is what we look at. So the idea is, as I told you, the structure is conserved more than the sequence. So the structure is more conserved than the function, and we believe the function is more conserved than the sequence. So that is why we take the sequences which are similar to find the structure. So you need to know the few terms. Already have introduced you these two terms, the target and template. Target is nothing but the protein sequence whose structure is not known. So you need to predict the structure for that particular protein, and that is known as the target. And this target sequence you compare with all the known structures in the PDB, protein data bank. And if it is more than 35% similar with any of the structures, that structure you will be taking as a reference, and that is known as the template. So the template is nothing but the known protein structure sharing detectable sequence similarity, that is more than 35% with the target sequence. When you compare the sequence of the target and the template, it will be more than 35% similarity. So such type of structure you take from the PDB, and that you call it as template. And this will be taken as the reference to build the structure of the target. And whatever structure you predict for the target protein, you call that as a model. Obviously, that is why we call it as modeling. And it is based on the similarity of the target and the template. So that is why we call it as homology modeling. Homology is a general term. What do you, two sequences or two proteins are homologous to each other when they are more than 35% similar, usually, or when they have similar ancestor, basically. So if they have some similar evolutionary relationship, you call them as homologous, right? They're coming from the same ancestor. So since we are using that concept here, you call it as homology modeling. And the structure that is predicted for the target, you call it as model. And yeah, I don't want to repeat this again, but quickly, you have the template, you have the target sequence with you whose structure is not known. You match with the structures in the PDB, you identify the template. that is whose structure is known, and then you use that as a reference, and you by aligning the template and the target, so the alignment comes here. So the template selection, the alignment of the template and the target, and then based on the template structure, you will be modeling the structure of the target. So structure modeling. So then you will be validating the structure, the model structure. If the structure is good, you will take that as a model structure. If the structure is not good, you try to refine it, going back with the template selection or other steps here, and try to improve the structure. So if you quickly go through the steps of homology modeling, we have 9 steps which we'll be using in tomorrow's hands-on session. So the first is the selection of the target sequence, which is optional. It depends on your requirement. And the second one is the recognition of template protein. Third is preparation of template protein. It is again optional. And then you have the sequence alignment, that is the alignment of the sequence of the template and the target. Then the secondary structure prediction of the target sequence. Then building the homology models. Then loop modeling. Loops are nothing but the regions which are not matching between the target and template. I told you the regions that are matching between or similar between the target and template, you call them as conserved regions. The regions that are not matching, you call them as non-conserved regions, and they will be the loops. And you need to model that loop separately. And finally, you need to optimize the model through energy minimization, and finally validate the models to see whether your predicted model is correct or not. So coming step by step in detail, selection of target sequence. It depends on an SCT, like usually it depends on the length of the target protein. So as I told you, the complete protein structure is not required sometimes. So what you are looking for, a certain region of the protein, say based on the function. So I told you the functional regions of the protein, you call them as domains. So whenever you are working with a protein structure, you need not take the whole protein structure. You can take only that particular region which is having the function of the protein, that is the domain region. So whenever you are working with a certain function of the protein, you can model only the domain of the protein. So you need not take the whole protein sequence. You can take only the domain of the protein sequence, right? So on that only the domain can be modeled separately. So the second is recognition of the template protein. So once you have the sequence whose structure is not known, that is the target sequence, you need to find the template from the protein data bank. So when you are selecting the template, you follow certain things you look for. They are the sequence similarity and sequence coverage. What are these? I will discuss in detail in tomorrow's session. And we also look at the structure quality. So the template structure you are taking from the protein data bank, right? So you take the structure which is having good quality. So it is based on the resolution and the experimental method. I told you there are different experimental methods like X-ray, NMR, etc. So X-ray method is better. So usually we go with X-ray structures identified through X-ray, and within that X-ray you have the resolution I told you, right? So the one which is having good resolution, that is less angstrom value. So those structures will be taking. So this is called template selection. And again, you will have different experimental conditions like ligands and cofactors bound to the template structure. So it depends on whether to take these or not, right? So that depends on your context, that is the target sequence basically. So these things we'll discuss. What should we do when you have the ligands or the cofactors? So the next one is preparation of the template protein. This is again optional. It depends on your template protein. If your template protein contains some unwanted components like water molecules, or if it is having multiple chains, like I told you, like you have homodimers, homotrimers, etc., right? So if there are multiple chains, if you are working, if only one chain is enough for you, you can take only that chain and you can remove the other chains, right? So this is called template protein preparation. You can remove the water molecules and the unnecessary ligands, etc. After template preparation, what we do is we go for the alignment of the template sequence with the target sequence. Template and target protein sequence are aligned because you need to tell the tool, right? If you are using a modeler, you need to tell the modeler which are the conserved regions or the similar regions in the between the target and the template. So based on that, it will model the conserved regions. Whichever regions are not conserved, that will be taken as the loops, and loop modeling will be done, right? So how does the tool know which regions in the template and target are conserved or not conserved? It is based on the sequence alignment. Alignment is nothing but you take the two sequences, you keep them side by side, and this is again very important step in the protein modeling. So like this. So if you have a, this is the target sequence, say for example, you can take the template and this is the template sequence. You can align them. So you can align them differently, like based on your requirement. You can do the alignment improvement as well. So if you can do the alignment improvement by shifting few amino acids in the alignment. So these alignment improvement and all comes when you are very versed with the modeling, homology modeling. So initial stages, you may not be knowing very well like how to improve the alignment, how to modify the alignment and all, but through practice, you will understand these things. But initially what you can do is whatever matching regions are there, you can directly take them for the protein structure prediction. You need not improve the alignment initially. You need not work with this one because you may not be well versed with that. So say for example, in the first stage, you have this alignment. In the second stage, you are moving threonine and proline here, right? So what is happening because of these two alignments? So you get something like this. So this is the template structure and this is the target sequence. So initially you had the target sequence like this, the colored ones, red color. So where the loop region will be very big, basically. The non-conserved region is very huge here. But when you move the threonine and proline towards right side, what happens is you are, reducing this particular loop region here. So this is a blue color. So where you are reducing the loop region. So typically in homology modeling, we try to reduce the loop regions. So that we will discuss in detail in tomorrow's session. So the next step is secondary structure prediction. So I told you, when you have a target sequence is nothing but amino acid sequence. So nothing but the primary sequence or the primary structure of the protein. So you need to first identify the secondary structure of the protein and then tertiary and quaternary structures of the protein, right? So secondary structure prediction should be done separately using different servers you have, different tools you have like SSPro or Cypred, etc. So we'll be identifying the secondary structure of the protein using one of these tools. And that secondary structure will be used for building of tertiary and quaternary structures. So then building homology modeling. See, in homology model building, basically we'll be building the tertiary structure of the protein, right? So we will be building the core conserved region, like whichever regions are conserved, we call them as conserved regions. So just by aligning the two sequences, and we leave the non-conserved regions that will be taken as the loops. So this is we will be dressing up the core model. We take the conserved regions and then non-conserved regions will be taken as the loops. And then we will be adding the modeling the side chains of the amino acids, right? So finally, we will be minimizing the protein structure. So after conserved or core modeling, the non-conserved regions will be taken as the loops, right? We'll be modeling the loops. So how do you model the loops? So the loop modeling, it is basically using two methods, knowledge-based or energy-based methods. So knowledge-based method is where we take the already available knowledge, that is already available structures in the protein data bank. What we do is we take only the loop region and we try to find the similar structures only for that loop, not the whole target protein. Only for that loop, we try to find the proteins, similar protein structures, right? If you get something, you will use that structure to identify the structure for the loop. The other method is energy based. You take the loop region and you try to minimize the energy of the loop using different methods like Monte Carlo or molecular dynamics, etc. These are intense. We need not to worry about like what methods are used. It depends on the software basically, right? So based on that, you do the energy minimization and you model the loops. So typically most of the softwares use the energy based methods. So tomorrow also we'll be seeing the modeler where we'll be using the energy based method for loop modeling. And yeah, this is like this. So you have two secondary structural elements or the conserved regions. You don't have a conserved region. Here you have the loop region. So based on the different loops that are available based on the knowledge method or energy minimized method, so you try to find the best fitting loop among the available loops. So say for example, this is best fitting here. So this loop will be using through the loop modeling. And after the loop modeling, what you have is loop modeling and conserved region modeling are the backbone modeling basically. Then you have the side chains of the amino acids. So of the backbone, after backbone, you have the side chains. So how do the model the side chains? Side chains are very flexible. So they have different conformations. Conformations are nothing but different flexible structures. So different flexible structures, you call them as conformations. And these are mainly based on the, energies. So you have different conformations based on the angles, dihedral angles we have already discussed, right? Phi and psi angles. Based on the different angles, they move, the side chains move, and they will have different structures known as conformations. And the energetically favorable or minimal energetically structure or conformation, you call it as rotamer. So like that, we have different rotamer libraries available, and those rotamer libraries can be used for predicting the side chains. And finally, once the backbone, which is conserved region, is modeled, and the non-conserved backbone region will be taken as the loops, and that will be modeled. And after the backbone modeling, you will model the side chains based on the rotamer libraries. After the side chain and backbone is modeled, finally you need to optimize the structure, or you need to refine the structure. So this structure or model optimization or refinement is done through energy minimization. So in energy minimization, when you look at the energies, the structures will have something known as two energies, local minimum energy and global minimum energy. So whenever you take any structure, it can be any biomolecule, you have two types, local minimum energy and global minimum energy. And only the stable structure is the one which is having the global minimum energy. So say for example, the model structure, if you assume that it is at the local minimum, when you minimize the structure, when you perform energy minimization, it will get energy minimized and it will reach the global minimum, which is the stable structure or the correct structure. That is what we believe. So in model optimization, what we are trying to do is we are trying to bring the local minimum energy of the structure to the global minimum energy by minimizing the energy. So we'll believe that global minimum energy is the correct protein structure. And yeah, as I told you, energy minimization will be used. And usually we don't go for extensive energy minimization because it will destroy the protein structure. So that is why we go for minimum energy, minimizing the energy to a certain extent. So this thing we will see in tomorrow's session. Like when we try to minimize the energy to a higher extent, what will happen? The structure might get distorted, and you might lose the correct structure, right? So that is why you need not do extensive energy minimization. These things also we will see in tomorrow's session. So for example, yeah, these energy minimizations are done based on something known as force fields. I'm not going in detail into these concepts because few of you might not understand them properly. So say for example, Swiss model uses Gromos 96 force field. So finally, once you have the protein structure, you will go for validation of the protein structure. You try to validate it. You try to see whether the structure that you have modeled or identified or predicted, whether it is correct or not. So in model validation, basically, you go with the comparing the protein target structure with the template structure. So the target structure is the model structure, right? You take the target sequence, you predict the structure for the target sequence, and that is the model structure. When you compare the model structure with the template structure, template is a reference structure. How do you compare them? You align them, you overlap them by aligning the structures, and you calculate the RMSD. RMSD is nothing but root mean square deviation. So the deviation between the backbone or the atoms between the two structures. So how the root mean square deviation between the two structures, when you calculate, sometimes they might be less than 2 angstroms. So usually what we believe is that when the RMSD value is less than 2 angstroms, that means we have a good structure. The RMSD value between the model structure and the template structure, if it is less than 2 angstroms, we believe that it is a good structure. The model structure is good. But usually more than 70% of the times it is the same case. Though sometimes we don't get a correct structure, the RMSD might be less than 2 angstroms. So we have to be more careful. So what we need to do is we need to use other methods other than the RMSD, calculating RMSD. We need to use other methods to validate the protein structure. So what are the other methods we can use? We can use different programs like ProCheck, What-If, ProSA, Verify 3D, Profile 3D, etc. So these things we'll discuss in detail in tomorrow's class session when we are doing protein structure validation. So for example, ProCheck, if you take, ProCheck works on Ramachandran plot. So as I told you, Dr. Ramachandran has predicted the ranges of the amino acids, dihedral angles, right? So the dihedral angles, that is phi and psi angles of any amino acid, will be within that range only. So whenever you model a protein structure, you calculate the dihedral angles of the amino acids in the protein structure. So if the dihedral angles of the amino acids in the model structure, if they are falling within the range given by Dr. Ramachandran, we say that our model protein structure is correct. If it is not falling within that range, if the phi and psi angles of amino acids in our model structure, if they're not falling within that range, we say that there is some problem with our protein structure, right? So then what we need to do, we will see in tomorrow's session. If the dihedral angles are falling outside the range, we can further refine the structures. And this is one beautiful server known as SAVES, Structure Analysis and Verification Server, where we have all the methods or all the programs like Array, Verify 3D, ProCheck, QuadCheck, etc. At one go, you can calculate all these parameters for the structure and try to see whether your predicted structure is correct or wrong. So sometimes there might be some errors in the homology modeling. So the errors might be because of the wrong side chain conformations which we take, or the backbone deviations, or you are trying to model the loops. Sometimes the loops cannot be modeled properly, or initially you are trying to align the target with the template, and if the alignment is not correct, then the predicted structure will be wrong, right? So it will be having a lot of errors. And finally, initially, when you are trying to take the template, that is the known structure from PDB, if you are choosing the wrong template also, the model structure will not be correct. So there are different stages where the structure might go wrong. So what you should do, there is no way that you can correct the final structure. You need to go to that particular stage wherever the structure is not correct. Say, for example, if your loops are not correct, you have to go to the loop modeling and you try to refine the loops. And if the final model structure is not correct, then you have to go back to the template and see whether you can find a better template. And you can still try to refine the alignment to see whether the alignment can be made better. So at each stage you can go. So errors can be recovered at a later stage. You have to go to that particular stage and you need to refine that particular errors so that the final model will be correct. Right? So yeah, finally we have come to the end. I have taken a long session, I guess. So I would like to acknowledge Manipal Institute of Technology, Manipal, and Manipal Academy of Higher Education, MAHE. And also I would like to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity, and thank you all the participants for patiently, bearing with me. And yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. So yeah. So if there are any questions or anything, I would like to take up quickly, maybe.
Yeah, of course, sir. There are some questions. One common
Shall I?
question from
Yeah.
Miss Sujita S and Dr. Shahab. How we can generate the query sequence and
Yeah, the query sequence you can take from the databases like UniProt and all that we'll be looking at in tomorrow's session. In hands-on session, we'll be starting from the scratch, from the basics. I will be teaching you, like if you want to take a protein sequence, if that is the target sequence, how to take it, how to decide whether which correct target sequence should be taken. All these steps we'll be discussing in tomorrow's session.
sir, one lengthy question is there from Miss Deepthi Jose. Shall I read out or will
Yeah,
you read?
yeah. Let me read, ma'am.
Okay.
So it is from Deepthi Jose. Yeah. So with some PDB X-ray crystal structure, amino acid residues may be missing. Can homology modeling with a sequence including the missing residues give a protein structure that better mimic the real protein? Okay. Also, sometimes researchers may induce some mutations to stabilize the crystal structure of the protein in vitro. How efficient is homology modeling in predicting the structure of protein with original amino acid residues? Will homology modeling yield a significant change in conformation? Okay, let me take question one by one. So the first one is like, can homology modeling with a sequence including the missing residues give a protein structure that better mimic the real protein? That is what you asked, right? So as I told you, when you compare the target sequence with the template sequence, the similar regions, you call them as conserved regions. And the non-conserved regions or the missing residues usually go into the loop. Basically, they form the loop. And that is where we do the loop modeling. So the missing residues, whatever you have, so that will be formed as a loop. And it is depending on us, like how better you refine the loops, how better you model the loops, right? It all depends on the energy minimization or knowledge-based method you can use, as I told you, right? So when you try to refine the loop better, when you minimize the energy loops better, then it is probably it might mimic the real structure if you have the missing residues. So then coming to the next one, sometimes researchers may induce some mutations to stabilize the crystal structure of the protein in vitro. I see there are different mutations that can be done by the researchers to study various aspects of the protein, like how does the protein behave, whether it will be more stable or less stable and all. But how efficient is homology modeling in predicting the structure of protein with original amino acid residues? Yeah, you need to know what structure you are taking basically. Though it is a mutated structure, if it is matching with your target sequence, obviously you need the structure of the target sequence, right? You are less concerned whether the template structure is mutated or not mutated. Though the template structure is mutated, it is identified through experimental method only. So that means whatever mutated amino acid is there, the structure of that amino acid is identified through experimental method. So you need not worry about it. So you are trying to take the experimentally identified structure and you are trying to model the structure. Will homology model yield a significant change in conformation? Okay, yeah. So again, I told you the conformation or the structural variability differs. Though you have doing homology modeling, finally you need to refine the structure through energy minimization. I told you, you need to bring from local minimum to the global minimum. So through energy minimization, so you, whatever conformational rigidity is there or differences are there, that is caused because of the template structure, those can be refined using energy minimization. Hope I have answered this question, right? So,
Yes, sir. Next is from Amit Bariswal. I'm sorry, I am pronouncing it.
yeah.
No,
Amit Bariswal, how to get
Bariswal.
to know which is domain structure for a given protein to get only domain structure prediction? Yeah, Amit, we will be discussing that in tomorrow's session when we are taking the target sequence whose structure is not known. That time I will discuss with you, like if you want to just identify the structure of only a particular region of a protein or a domain, how to take the domain only. That I will be discussing in tomorrow's session. right?
Yes, sir. Hassan Sunil is asking, what is the loop section made of?
The loop section is usually made up of the non-conserved amino acids. So when you compare the target sequence whose structure is not known with the template structure in the PDB, whichever regions are matching between them, whichever sequences are matching, that will be taking as the conserved, with usually the secondary structural elements like alpha helices and beta sheets will be formed in the conserved regions. Whichever regions are not conserved, that regions will usually form into the loops.
One more question. Sir, can you find that? Vatsala Bandara. That is, if we go for
Yeah.
a trading method because of no similar structure in PDB, and once we receive the protein structure, which steps should we follow? Example, energy minimization, etc.
I didn't get that question, ma'am. Can you just?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
there.
I got it. If we go for a threading method because of no similar structures in PDB, and once we receive the protein structure, which steps should we follow? Arrange minimization, etc. Yeah. So if you are going with other methods like threading, we won't be discussing the threading hands-on. We will be discussing only homology modeling. But still, if you don't have a good template structure, you will be going with threading using any of the servers like iTaser, for example. When you get the structure, you can further refine the structure using energy minimization, or what you can do is further you can validate the structure also using any of the methods that we usually use for validating, like Ramchandran plot, or usually see homology modeling is till we model the structure. So after that, refining the structure through energy minimization, validating the structure using ProCheck, what if, etc. All these are common for any structure. If you are using predicting the structure using threading or any other method, you can further refine the structure using energy minimization and validate it using the methods, validation methods.
Thank you, sir. I think the questions are over and it's time to wind up. And some participants are asking for the presentation. So it was informed by one of the coordinator, that is Dr. Hijaz, in the beginning, just before the starting of Dr. Fayaz's presentation, that we will share the recorded session after the entire session of 10-day session. And today we had an excellent theory-based information regarding the protein structure, and tomorrow we will have a, definitely I am sure, a beautiful uh, hands-on session on the same by Dr. Fayaz. So Dr. Shahab is asking if possible, please share the presentation. Yeah, yes, of course we are sharing. That's what I was telling. We are sharing all the presentation on this only after the. I'm sorry from the background noise. Only after the 10-day workshop, and let us conclude here. See you all tomorrow, inshallah, for the hands-on session by Dr. Fayaz. And of course, it was very wonderful presentation, helping also Dr. Fayaz. Thank you so much from the participant side.
Thank you, ma'am.
So much appreciations are on the chat box. Actually, it is very helpful for me also because I am handling the biophysics paper in my PG for my students. So it's a very good session for me also.
Yeah. Biophysics, actually, it's very much related.
Yeah, of course. So thank you so much for your presentation, your time, for sharing the knowledge. And tomorrow, my dear participants, we can have a very wonderful session, as I told you.
Yeah,
So
I
good night.
think,
Thank
sorry to
you.
interrupt you, ma'am.
Yeah,
I think someone has asked like which software we'll be using tomorrow. We'll be using Modeler, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. So thank you so much, and we will create a WhatsApp group too, as informed by Dr. Hijaz. Thank you so much. Good night, and please pay a minute for pray for the Kerala, especially the South Kerala people who is very much having problems, the flood, the unexpected flood today. Thank you all. Good night.
Good night, all. See you tomorrow. Bye.